This episode of the Pedalshift Project is brought to you by Cycle Blaze, a welcoming community of people who love to travel by bicycle. Post your own travel journals, follow other people's journals, or talk about bike travel in the forum. All for free at cycleblaze.com. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/147, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline, 202-930-1109, and you can check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. That sound means it is the Pedalshift Holiday Spectacular 2018. Does anybody else remember the CVS holiday music? It's not the music. It was that bump, that drum thing that you hear. I put that at the beginning of it because during holiday season for me, when I heard that sound, I knew that something great was coming. A great bit of programming was coming. So I always do a little homage to that. No Shifty the Elf this year, as I mentioned on the Sprocket Podcast, if you haven't had a chance to hear that. The reason why I mentioned the Sprocket Podcast is because this very episode, the Holiday Spectacular 2018, is a year-end chat with Aaron and Guthrie from the Sprocket Podcast on the best things in biking and the podcast, and a chat about traversing the Darien Gap, plus looking forward to 2019. It's a really great interview, really great chat. But I also happen to have been on the Pedalshift Project the last couple of weeks, last couple of episodes, actually. So my 11th visit was episode number 444, which is a super Syracusey number, which I just love. And also on episode 445, which you should check out, which is actually a rebroadcast of my very first appearance on the Sprocket Podcast. Why does that matter for you? Well, if you're at all interested in sort of where my brain was at, sort of before Pedalshift became Pedalshift, that whole interview was really the very beginning, was part of the genesis of the whole idea of everything. So go check that out. That's episode 445 of the Sprocket Podcast. It is a good show. You should check that out. Before we dive in, here are some end of the year things to chat about. We've got some podcast sponsor slots that are available starting in 2019. You can check that out at pedalshift.net/sponsor for more information. If you're into bike touring or you got a bike touring adjacent product or service and you'd like to get some folks to listen to that, go check that out. Next week, which will be the first episode of 2019. That's going to be a best of episode, which is usually the first week is usually a best of episode for the Pedalshift Project. That's going to be featuring friend of the show, Michael Risica, on crossing the U.S. by bike. And I actually reached out to him to give him the heads up that it was coming. So it was nice to get in touch with him again. He's got some really cool stuff going on. You can check him out. I think he's over at Young Architect these days. He does some really cool kind of off the wall stuff, kind of shaking the tree a little bit in the architect business. It's pretty cool. So anyways, check him out talking about crossing the U.S. by bike. He's done it 3 times on next week's episode. January, if you thought was going to be like a slow month because it's winter, no, not at all. It's the furthest thing from slow. We've got some interviews lining up, which I'm really excited about. I don't want to jinx them because they're not in the can yet. I learned my lesson on that a while ago. I've got a winter tour announcement. Yes, I do. I talk about on this very show in the interview that I haven't thought about my winter tour. I've got a winter tour, but I'm not going to announce it yet because I got some fine tuning to go. But it's happening in February, it looks like. So I'll talk about it in the middle of January because I think it'll be important for you to know about because, well, it's a bike tour. It's going to be cool. I've also got a couple of great events in the DC area if you're into a little Pedalshift flavor for your January meetup-y kind of thing. What is that, you may ask? Okay, here's the deal. If you remember back this past summer, we chatted with Annalisa and Eric from Miles of Portraits. That is episode number 122 of the Pedalshift Project. Just go pedalshift.net/122 and you can listen to that if you haven't already. Well, they took that very cool 1,000-mile Alaskan tour project and made not only a film, but a magazine out of it. And they are touring the U.S., showing the results of all of this, starting January 9th in Cranston, Rhode Island. I will be emceeing 2 events here in the DC area for them as a part of this whole big tour. I'll be doing the emceeing, I'll be doing the Q&A, and a little bit more as well, as we'll talk about in a second. Tyson's REI. These are both at REI locations. The Tyson's Corner REI in Virginia, that is kind of Northern Virginia, suburban DC. If you're from around here, you know what I'm talking about. That'll be Tuesday, January 22nd. Also at the DC REI on Thursday, January 24th. The cool thing about the DC REI is it's in a building where the Beatles made their first U.S. appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, and it's just kind of a cool historical building, and they've got a few posters up to commemorate that. But anyways, they're going to be there both of those dates, Tuesday and Thursday. Both of those events are 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. The very cool thing, the extra little pedal shift spin on the ball that we're doing is immediately following the event on the 24th, on Thursday the 24th, we're going to be doing a pedal shift / Miles of Portraits meetup at a very close by spot to be announced in a little bit. The event and the meetup are both free to attend, but the Miles of Portraits folks, they will be making the magazine available for purchase. There will be adult beverages and food available for purchase at the meetup locale. More details to come in the new year. Come hang out. This is the first meetup of 2019. If you are in the DC area or you want to come out, you want to travel, you want to come out and hang, January 22nd and 24th, that is the time to do it. So really excited about all of that. And I, of course, will be talking much more about that in the episodes upcoming. Next up on the Pedalshift Holiday Spectacular 2018. It's a mouthful, isn't it? It's easier when I had an elf doing this. Aaron Flores and Guthrie Straw are the co-hosts of the Sprocket Podcast, a show about simple living, bicycling, and a whole lot more. If you are in the 1% of listeners of this show, the Pedalshift Project, that aren't aware of the Sprocket Podcast, do yourself a favor, as I always say, and give them a listen. They're at thesprocketpodcast.com. My 11th appearance, as I mentioned at the top of the show, was episode 444, which is such a Syracusey number. I love it. And a rebroadcast of my first appearance, as I mentioned again at the top of the show, is episode 445. It laid the foundation of Pedalshift. I just listened to it on Christmas Day, and I was just like, that there was a lot of interesting stuff in that. I kind of laid it all out there, and I didn't even realize it. So anyways, go take a listen to those things. But wait, don't, because you're right here. You should listen to the 2018 Pedalshift Holiday Spectacular interview of Aaron and Guthrie. This is the end of the year show for the Pedalshift Project. And so on this episode, rather than bring the elf back, he's working the board, as you guys can see.
Yes,
Shifty the elf is working the board. He decided not to engage in any more massacring of holiday pop culture. But instead, I thought it would be kind of fun to do special guest stars from the Sprocket Podcast to come on the show. Thank you. And to talk about what your favorite story from this year was on the podcast, and then also maybe your favorite thing that happened in bicycling, especially if it was a bike touring thing, but I just don't know what your bike touring situations were this year. So whatever sort of fits fun storytelling things sort of to wrap up the year. So I thought we maybe start with the podcast, because we're sort of cousin podcasts. So there's so many people that listen to both. I thought it would be kind of fun to be like, what was your favorite thing that happened this year on the Sprocket Podcast? May not surprise you. I think one of my favorites this year, and there's probably several, but the one that's coming to mind of the Sprocket Podcast is Metal Cowboy Joe Kramanski.
Just because, man, yeah,
that dude just brings the stories, man.
Yeah,
and I mean, maybe I'm a little biased because it's obviously got some bicycling and bicycle touring kind of stuff, but I thought that was a really fun show.
Has he ever been on your show?
Never, and that's something I need to change. I need to change at some point. It's just like I don't have a personal relationship with him, and one of these days I got to get him on.
He's pretty easygoing.
Yeah, he seems very like-minded.
Just drop that you heard him on our show, and he'd be like, I'm
such a diva, that Kramanski. Well, do you guys, now I'm putting you on the spot, did you have a favorite Pedalshift Project episode this year? You're like, I don't listen to your fucking shit.
Not a specific episode, but I'm really excited about the beginner series. Even though I was playing like I couldn't remember the name.
No.
But and it's sort of personal for me because a good friend of mine and his partner are embarking on, I think, their first cross-country journey. If they've taken one before, they've never spoken. And what was really cool and what reminded me of the Pedalshift and specifically of you, Tim Mooney, is that they're doing like the train to get over the passes or to do the fast
forwards.
Yeah. They're gonna bike down to Salinas,
California.
train down to Salinas,
Okay.
bike through Big Sur,
Nice
and
choice.
then train east. I can't remember to where, and then start biking east from there. And that's all going to happen in February. Why?
Okay.
I don't know.
February
but
is a
that's-
good time.
There is a real good reason to go take trains through mountains in February.
Yeah.
That's hardcore, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
But it's, as far as I can tell, it's their first like cross country tour together. So I kind of want to get them on the beginner series.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we got the back episodes too, because the guy that I was working with, James, did the Trans Am across east to west. So, I mean, it's a little backwards for them, and I don't know what route they're taking, but yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Guthrie, do you have any episode that comes to mind, or series of episodes, or?
Yeah, I think for me it's more of like a sensation, and this is actually what I really like about what I view as like kind of like
Guthrie actually listens to your show.
similarities and differences between both podcasts. I mean, like it's both bike related, but it's kind of just like it's like a different flavor of your favorite ice cream. You know, you like ice cream, but you have your chocolate chip and you have your like moose tracks or something like that. And I was trying to remember, was it the Katy Trail that you were the first one you had done new this year?
That was that was a new one for me this
in
year.
Okay.
March, right?
May.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of those M months.
And I think for me, what it is about that experience and just more generally is how you capture being on the road. I've listened to quite a few podcasts about biking this year. And for me, it's just like, I know I'm on a Tim Mooney podcast when I can just like sink into your mind and you're just taking us there. Like, I feel like I'm right with you. And I haven't really gotten that from other podcasts. And so I think for me, it's more, I just really enjoy the storytelling that you do. And I feel like it makes you really comfortable in listening to it. And not even from a like new person getting into it, but more from a just like, hey, you like, this is how it goes. Like, here's this experience. I think that you capture that essence in a way that I haven't heard elsewhere.
Well, you're welcome back on the show anytime you want. That's all I have to say.
And that struck me particularly about that, the Katy Trail.
Cool, yeah. And I'm glad you say that, because that's sort of the intention. It's sort of like the idea is like, I'm literally bringing you along for the ride.
Yeah.
And it's like, if something weird's going on, I'm going to tell you about it. You know, it's like, I'm not going to edit out the weird stuff. You know, it's just, because I honestly, I don't edit out a lot of the stuff. It's like, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, most of it makes the final cut, which is why so many of them, that Katy Trail one, I think was like 6 or 7 episodes long, just because there was so much weirdness that went on, and the crazy ass thunderstorms that I had to escape and stuff like that.
And full disclosure, I think I listened to maybe like 60 to 80% of that series, but I just remember like for the moment tuned in, I was just like, so I didn't get on too many bike tours this summer, and I felt like I was there in the saddle listening to those episodes.
That I appreciate hearing that. And that's sort of the idea too. I have run into a bunch of people who, the shocking thing to me is how many people listen to the show that haven't gone on their first bicycle tour yet.
Yeah.
And I discovered that relatively recently, which is why I started the beginner series, just to maybe help people kind of get over the hump. But like, that's why I moved the actual tour content onto the show, because I was like, okay, well, yeah, if you've never done one before, you should see what it's like. And then at the same time did some of the video stuff, because, you know, there's only so much we can do, you know, to convey stuff through microphones, right? You know, it's like, oh, wow, this is a beautiful view. Trust me, you know.
Stick the
I
mic
can
by the
describe
chain.
it to you.
Yeah.
Stick the mic by the shifter.
Dude, yeah. Because I'm the producer of the show, I'm not allowed to have favorites, except I'm going to make an exception.
I was actually going to give you that question anyway.
Yeah.
Like, was there one that you recorded this year that like just sticks out as fairly memorable?
I think that the tour ones, the tour ones were really interesting, but I really liked talking to some of the women that I spoke with this year, because they were the two that are coming to mind. Carrie Gross, who did her show. She did an entire podcast around a cross-country tour while interviewing these incredibly awesome women. And I really appreciated it, because the types of stories that she was able to tell, and then to intertwine that in a bicycle tour at the same time. I was just like, so the interview that I had with her was really fun and eye-opening. And then I had Annalisa Vandenberg on a couple of times as well.
So did Annalisa tell you the link between the Sprocket?
Yes.
And you? Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Cool.
What's exciting is she's doing a little mini tour with her 1,000 Miles of Portraits, and she's coming to DC, so I'm super excited to be able to run into her again. So, yeah. So I think that those were kind of my favorite of the interview shows. Of course, you know, the Sprocket Podcast ones were pretty good, too. But those were really fun, because
we don't get to be guests on your show nearly as often as you get to be guests on ours.
Well, it was funny because I have the Twitter thing that like kind of goes through the back episodes and just like best of Pedalshift, blah, blah, blah. And it was like episode 004, Aaron from the Sprocket Podcast. And I was like, damn. And that I think you may remember this, Aaron. We were back at the IPRC. And that's was
the one that we're going to reissue soon, by the way.
Oh, cool. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
But that was when
it's like, I just met you.
Literally.
It was like, just that day.
Yeah, I'm like, hi, my name is Tim. You know?
Walking into the studio.
Yeah. But you were talking at some point in there, and I came up with the phrase, let's shrink the world by bike in the middle of that interview. And it was just, and that became the tagline for the show. So it's like, you know, I feel like I owe you a little bit of thanks on, I don't even know what the hell you said that made me come up with that.
I don't remember saying it. So
yeah, it was pretty funny. Well, you didn't say it, but you said something that I was like, let's shrink the world by bike. I'm going to write that down, you know, something like that.
Right on.
I do think that, going back to what you were saying about the Katy Trail, like I think that series was so fun for me because so much of what I do from a bike touring perspective is sort of hitting the old faithful roots, you know, the Oregon coast, California, the C&O, you know, to be able to do something that was completely new. And, you know, it was a little outside of my comfort zone in some ways, even though it's like, that's kind of the whole point of bicycle touring. But it was nice to do something that was sort of on my list and that everybody was like, you've got to do the Katy Trail, dude. You got to do it. You got to do it. Go.
Do it now.
And to have it not only meet but exceed my expectations, because it was just sort of like, oh yeah, this is really cool. Even though like I don't have any connections to the state of Missouri, like nothing, like this is not part of my upbringing. I didn't go there as a kid. I don't have that connection. And to have that be so cool and to kind of discover new things that people didn't kind of say, oh, you got to stop in this town for that. And, you know, I went to this like Mayfest in this, forgive me, I'm going to forget the name of the town, but it's this German town in Missouri. Mm-hmm. And going up there and, you know, all these Missouri people and, you know, German music and, you know, bratwurst and stuff like that. I'm like, this is so weird and awesome at the same time. But to be able to convey that and bring that to the podcast, that was like another kind of cool thing like that. So anyways. Okay, now I'm going to round the corner and then let you guys go into this rainy night. What was your favorite bikey moment this year that you did? And whether it was on a tour or whether it was just kind of scooting around town, like what was your favorite kind of thing that happened?
I thought of this like almost immediately when you posed the question off mic, and it was at a time where Anna and we had looked at this apartment in Minneapolis and it sucked. And like not in the way of like this apartment is run down, like this apartment has real like structural issues.
It's like the bridge that fell in the Mississippi. It's of apartments.
Like I mean, we're still talking with a lawyer about this.
Wow.
This is how bad the apartment was. Like she put a deposit down sight unseen, you know, with some pictures that didn't match what real life was.
Oh, we call that fraud in the biz.
Yeah, who'd have thought? Yeah. And yeah, like I said, we're still talking with a lawyer about it. But in the meantime, so we get into Minneapolis, and I had just was like, oh, Andre Johnson lives around there. Hey, are you free today? Do you want to like hang out and do something? And so he didn't intend to like spend the whole day with us, but due to that whole thing, like
and he's a supporter of the Sprocket podcast.
Supporter of the Sprocket. He ended up like spending the whole day. But then after we're done with this whole experience and like talking with this, not even the landlord wouldn't take our calls. We ended up talking with like the building manager there on site, who himself was like trying to wash his hands of the whole thing.
Right. Not my problem.
Yeah, exactly. You know, after all of that, I'm like, dude, what do we do? And he's like, fuck it. Let's go ride some bikes.
Yeah.
You can't. He's
we're not going to solve
budge.
this today.
We're not going to solve this. Let's go ride some bikes. And he knew a person that got us a bike. He had actually brought Anna a bike to use while she's in Minneapolis, that she had like sort of on permanent loan from them.
Nice.
And so the three of us, we just biked all over the city. And, you know, I'm not going to be like, and then the day everything was all right and everything was okay and I didn't worry about a thing. But what was really cool about this was I didn't have to think about that for a while.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a break. And also, like, Minneapolis, their bike infrastructure is so interesting.
Yeah.
Because at one point,
you mean interesting, right?
Whatever.
Interesting.
I know I'm outnumbered here,
Only
but I'm
2 to 1.
I'm dying on this hill. But what was cool about their infrastructure is that it's around so much green space, and there's just tons of waterways around there, land of 1,000 lakes. That like we were out in nature a lot, and we never left the city, but you never felt like you were in the city for a lot of it too. Like there was a lot of cool points, and like I said, like I didn't have to think about like all the shitty things that we had to deal with for a while. I was just out in the woods for a while.
And it's nice to get introduced to a city by bicycle.
Oh yeah,
that is such a bike forward place. That's really cool. That's on my list. I've been to the Twin Cities a bunch of times, but I've never seen it by bike, and I'm really looking forward to do that sometime.
Definitely should. I'm gonna be there tomorrow. I won't have a bike with me, but I still want to check out their infrastructure, because I've been told that when they plow the streets, they also have to plow, like by law, have to plow their bike paths.
That's my understanding too.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see like how this is gonna play out. Yeah,
that's really cool. Guthrie, what was your bike moment of 2018?
I think it actually happened like 2 days ago.
It can happen.
It's more.
It was waiting all year to happen.
It was waiting almost like 7 years to happen. Actually, and it was this.
It's almost of a decade.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I guess the backstory would be is that folks who know me know that I own only one bike. And it's really hard to be in the bike industry and work at a bike shop for half a decade and like just make it through the bike culture thing, only owning one bike. But I was actually riding home the other night and I felt this little barb on my right hand, just where the shifter was. And it was my derailleur cable starting to fray. And at first, like initially, just for a moment, I was like a little bit annoyed that was happening. But then it actually caused me to pause and reflect that since 2011, jokingly called the Queen of Pain, but in a very endearing way.
Yeah.
Like I've truly gotten, I would call like I have a relationship with my bike. And I almost put something out there to the world the other day, which is just like, how cool is it when you have a machine or just something that you use, and sometimes it's more conscious and sometimes it's less, but this thing that exists in your life that tells you what it needs before it breaks. And that you can have such a good relationship with that rather than viewing it as a sign of like frustration or annoyance, I was just like, thank you. Thanks for telling me what you need. And just like realizing that I've had the same bike since 2011 and we have like this shared history, and I've never really had a bike that's lasted that long before either getting stolen or lost due to age or some other factor. So I think at the end of 2018, I'm just really appreciative for everything that's led to that moment. And that I would say is my favorite biking moment of 2018.
That's very arty and cool, man.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I didn't think you were going to like come out the turn saying like, and so then I bought another bike because you started talking about how
then I threw it in the trash and got something new.
Yeah, just like I've only ever owned one bike, you know, and so there was a small part of me that's like, did he do it? No, no.
Like I don't deny that day may come, but you know, if you've had 6-7 years to reflect on that moment that you pulled the trigger and you said, yep, this is the right time, the right bike, this is what I need for me.
Yeah.
And it has always been the right bike. It's always been the right choice. Yeah. And I think I'm just realizing that now.
It speaks to the longevity of these machines if you invest in a decent quality bike to begin with. I've got this great steel framed bike that is my touring bike that, I've often been like, because I'm kind of an early adopter with technology and stuff like that, and like I'm quick to replace my phones, just because I want the better camera and whatever. But I'm not like that at all with the bikes. It's just like I wear out the drivetrain and I replace it, and stuff like that. But that frame is rock solid and it's not going anyplace, and there's nothing to upgrade to really. I mean, I guess I could, move to a bike that's got instead of rim brakes, maybe
disc brakes.
But I'm like, I don't really need that, and it's funny because I know you talking about this makes me realize that this is the one thing in my life that I'm cool with not having the absolute latest technology and things like that. And I wonder why that is. It's the reliability maybe and the longevity of these types of things. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
How old is your oldest bike?
Let's see. The Safari I got, did I get that for the 13 trip? No, but I did have it for the 14 trip. So let's say it is now, it's probably rounding the corner to 5 years.
Right on.
At least, because I don't remember specifically when I got that bike. Because what happened was the bike that I got, I think it was 13, was I did a tour of the California coast with the Climate Ride folks. And it was so not the right bike for climbing the coastal California, because it's, those are some real deal hills and stuff like this. And I didn't understand gearing or anything like that. And this was like, it was a hybrid bike, but it was definitely meant for speed and flats, like trying to get speed. It had terrible low gears. And I didn't know this, and I didn't understand it. And I'm riding with my buddy James, Mysterious James, and he's zooming up these hills in his brand new Surly long haul trucker. And I'm like, what number gear are you in? I mean, I'm in 4th. He's like, yeah, I'm in whatever. And we still didn't understand. There's a huge difference in gear ratios and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking, I can ride like 7 hours a day on the flats on the C&O, and it's no problem, and I'll be great. And I won't. The one thing I didn't want was I didn't want to be the last person at the end of the day, and I always was the last person because everybody else was like riding these like climby 4-ounce bikes, and I'm on this thing that was just not built for it at all. Long story short, that bike got stolen out of my hallway. Hi, DC, and and I replaced it with this bike because it was like it was a bike that was built for touring. Yeah. And then it too needed it needed better climbing gears. And as I started to learn over time, it's like what I didn't know could just about fill the Grand freaking Canyon. And that was another reason why I enjoyed starting the podcast, because I was like, there was no real resource that kind of put all of this stuff together. Yeah. There was, the Sheldon Brown site for gearing and all that, but like to put it in the bike touring context, nothing really worked. There's great places for learning about tours. There was or where to go on tour and tour journals and things like that. And there was a great resources for learning about gearing, but not like, how do you piece this all together? Sure. And so that's what I kind of learned over the time. I'm like, all right, well, let me just kind of aggregate that together and see what happens. And here we are.
Well, and a lot of that knowledge is predates the technology in which we now know or now are used to accessing information.
Totally.
I mean, even the internet versions of like bike touring advice or even mechanical advice, they're still like old enough to where like you kind of already have to be in the know to know where to look.
And I also think that we're experiencing a shift.
Yeah.
Like I think that the panniers are never going to go away, but I think that bike packing is really making I think we've talked about this. I think 3 of us have talked about this on podcasts
I'm getting
before.
Deja vu. Yeah.
That it is impacting. We're in the midst of a shift. I think what bike touring is going to look more like what bike packing is over time, because I'm seeing it out in the field a lot more.
I'm feeling that pull too, as somebody who fully committed to the pannier route.
and what's funny, I was exactly in that boat, and then I was like, oh, let me experiment a little bit more. And a more recent iteration, my 2018 iteration of some of my rides were very much more borrowing from the bike packing motif.
Well, and so, I think in a way that can also make bike touring a little bit more accessible, in that like you don't have to bring everything with you if you don't want to.
Exactly.
Like, there is a way to do it where you hey, just bring a sweater and bring like this tiny little whatever excuse for a sleeping bag that you have.
Bring your spirit.
Yeah. But
sleep
it's
under
still
a
like
picnic bench.
The idea of like you don't have to be weighed down going up this hill, I think, is very attractive to a lot of people who would otherwise be like, I'm not.
I can't do that. Touring. And then the flip side is, there are still plenty of people out there that are like, I want to bring everything.
I'm still gonna be slightly like probably 1.5 feet in that camp.
Yeah, I think all answers are correct in all this, and that's definitely what I think we all agree on that, and that's. Something that I think has been a part of what this show has been all about too. So, it's whatever. Well, ride to ride has always been my thing. So, right. You know, you have to do that. I think my favorite bike moment this year was, strangely enough, the fact that I bookended the year with 2 Brompton tours.
Oh yeah.
And it always feels like I'm cheating a little bit when I tour in a Brompton, because I'm sort of like, how the hell am I pulling this off, you know? and just like to kind of, even though the last tour didn't go as long as I'd wanted it to, it still was kind of fun. It was like, you know, it's like, okay, I got this $1 fare to get on a bus, and you know, I went up there and I at least started it, and if the weather had cooperated, I would have finished it. But like, you know, at the beginning of the year, it was just sort of like, okay, I'm throwing this in the overhead compartment of a plane, and then I'm gonna go, and then I'm gonna take like 6 buses to get out to the, you know, or buses and ferries to get out and be on the Pacific Coast main line tour and do that little piece of it on this crazy little clown bike, you know. And it's just sort of like, you know, to kind of piece together adventures in ways that are not what you would otherwise expect. That was sort of my favorite bikey moment, was that I was able to do unusual things with that bike. But at the same time, I also did some, you know, traditional tours in weird ways, like the Oregon Loop with the safari.
Oh yeah.
And you know, to be able to, it's like, you're damn right I'm going to go northbound on the Pacific Coast route. And I know nobody does that, but I want to do it. And it was kind of cool.
Sorry. Your derailleur goes backwards. Why shouldn't you?
Why shouldn't I? Yeah. It's like, oh yes, there are headwinds, I heard a report. Yes. And the shoulders are tinier. But yeah. But it was really fun, and it was cool to kind of like find, you know, ways to do proof of concept, and then to like have these crazy ideas, do a little research, look them up and go, yeah, I think I can do this on the podcast. Why not? You know, so it's kind of fun. And it's always fun to like kind of share that out there and to get the feedback that people are like following along and interested in this kind of thing. So I thank you, the listener, for putting up with this nonsense for all these years.
Yeah. So since this is sort of a year-end thing, I don't think any year-end episode would be complete without like predictions for the next year, or what are you looking forward to?
That's a great question. I would throw that back at you, but I think you were going to ask me first. So, you know, this is the first, I think, end of the year.
I just don't want to go home yet.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to go home.
I have to pack, and then I have to.
The of us are flying out tomorrow, I think, right? I may see you at the PDX in the morning.
What time's your flight at?
10 a.m.
Oh, no, I'll miss you. Mine's at 2.
Oh, so okay.
Well, I have to take a class tomorrow. I'm going straight from class to the airport.
So I won't see you at the airport.
No.
So I'll have to answer this question now. You know, this is the first time I think at the end of any year that I haven't already put some thought into what my next tour is. And I think I talked about this on a past episode that like, on the live show, because somebody said, hey, what's your next tour? And I'm like, damned if I know. I mean, like, I think I said, you know, if it would ever stop raining in the District of Columbia or nearby, I'd say the best money would be I'll do an overnight on the C&O even sometime this winter, because every once in a while we'll get like a little burst of little thaw. Yeah.
February thaw.
Exactly, yeah.
In Michigan. Us Michiganians call it that.
And in Western New York, we had those occasionally too. So, yeah, we had those. And a couple, was it last year or the year before, it hit 79 one day in February. And I was like, I'm going out. I'm taking the dog and I'm going by, you know? So I'm hoping that maybe something like that would happen. But I'm also looking at doing something somewhere. I want to try to do another new to me tour next year, at least one. And, you know, one of these days, I really want to do a cross-country tour. And it's just, the problem is, I know I could probably pull that off. The issue is, and this is so true for so many people, it's like, it's not just me. I have, you know, the dogs, and I have my partner, and she's got a burgeoning, you know, practice and all this other kind of stuff. And it's sort of like, me making choices has consequences with other people. Yeah. It's not just me. So it's sort of like, okay, I could do that. And I know I could take off 6 weeks and do something, but that would put a lot of pressure on her. So it's sort of like, sometimes you got to make choices that are fitting within your partner's choices. And so that's why for the last couple of years, it's been more on the week longers and stuff like that. But I've still managed to have some fun adventures doing that. So I know I can at least do that next year, but maybe I can kind of piece together the Southern Tier or something like that along the way. Cause that's the one thing that I feel like it's missing from my US touring. And then of course, I also wouldn't mind doing something more international and not just Canada, which would be fun too. I'd love to tour a little bit in Canada, but
it is kind of cheating though.
It feels
as an American.
Yeah, it's well, especially I grew up like so close to the border. It's like Canada was like, oh, you went to Canada, big deal, dude. Possibly, I have a cousin who lives in Brussels, and it's about a 2-day ride from Paris to Brussels, 2-3 day ride.
Oh, right on.
And I thought that I've talked a lot about cycle touring in France, and it's really good, and there's a really good, well developed route that goes there. Yeah. And I think that might be something that would be cool to look at as well, and be like, hey, yo, Brussels, and crossing an international border on a bike, and all those like little kind of fun things, even though it's it's no big deal, it's the EU now, but still
just those Britons.
Yeah, right. I understand. I understand there may be some changes afoot. Well, anyways, I think that's kind of what I'm looking for. What about you guys? Yeah. Bike wise, what's on your radar? Anything?
Well, I think I spent most of the year, kind of reconciling the fact that I may not be as much of a bike tourer as I want to be currently. Sure. But getting into city biking a lot more, or maybe reconciling the fact that I am very much a city biker. Way more than a bike tourer or a bike camper, though bike camping will definitely always be sort of really close to my heart. But so one thing I'm looking forward to this year, given my situation with travel, is learning other cities' infrastructure by bike.
Nice.
And hopefully this is like kind of pie in the sky, but that's what goals are for. Hopefully making it all the way out to Tsukuba, Japan.
Oh, cool.
And biking around there with the great people that we met.
I've actually been there. And of course, if you listen to the Sprocket Podcast, you know what Aaron's talking about with those folks from Scuba. They had the World Expo there back in the mid-'80s when I lived in Japan. And so that's when I went there. Yeah. It's a cool little town. Yeah.
Tad and the rice cookers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's really awesome. That's also that's another country on my list. I just got to figure it out. I do know people who live in Tokyo, and one of the listeners to the show has talked about it, cycle touring in Japan. Actually, I'm supposed to get him on the show at some point too. But it's a really good country. It's a little expensive to bike camp in there, but it's supposed to be super cool.
That makes sense.
But Japan's an amazing country. So cool. Guthrie, what about you? What's 2019 looking like for you?
2019.
You're like, I don't even look forward to more than a day.
Well, it's tempting to, but I'd say similar to yourself, I've done a lot of life transitions this year, and oftentimes those life transitions in the past have coincided with a bicycle tour. Since I landed in Portland, quite literally, I've been telling people about wanting to do a tour from Alaska down to Chile.
The big one.
And, every year, a year goes by.
Yes.
So hopefully with some of the transition that I'm making, that will be more of a reality than it's been in years past. Something where maybe by September or October of this coming year, that could be a thing. So I hold that as kind of like the pie in the sky. That's something I would certainly like to do before I'm dead, and will try to do before I get too along in the swing of things. But on a shorter term, similar to our Japan thread, I just had a very good friend move to Japan, and I'm always looking for an excuse to go bike touring in another country.
The Sprocket goes to Japan!
Yeah. I mean, we've got the Tad and the rice cooker. There are compounding reasons why Japan is high up on the list.
Yeah.
So I might get a little bit jumpy and go for a shorter Japan trip if something needs to happen in between. But I'd say overall, my goal, as it's been for the last 5 years, is to get out and do that lifelong trip.
That's cool.
That lifetime trip.
Anytime I hear anybody talking about making the trip to Chile, the Alaska to Chile trip, what do you know what your working theory is on traversing the Darien Gap? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I have, actually.
Quick sidebar for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah.
You can't technically do wheels to the ground the entire length. There is a portion between, forgive me, Panama and Colombia that is literally it's impassable. There is no road, except it is passable in a couple of different ways. You can do air, you can do boat, and you can risk your entire life by going through this crazy jungle with lots of poisonous shit and go through. It's been done. Yeah.
Who's the guy that does all the MASH stylish videos. He's like famous single track race / like enthusiast. Fuck. He puts out a ton of videos. I'm trying to remember his name.
Did he do a video?
He did.
With it? Yeah.
And classically made a video of it.
Of course,
It's not
he did.
Nathan Jones.
No. It's
That's the only thing I think Nathan Jones hasn't pulled off.
I would say I remember him because he's like the most aggro video maker that I know, or filmmaker that I know, but in like the way that only he could be. So it's like kind of charming in a sense.
Oh, totally. So, anyways, to circle it back to you on this is that this gap needs to be traversed in one way, and bicycle tourists of all shapes and sizes have different theories on how to do this. Mm-hmm. I have found one person. I think his handle's Hike Bike Safari. I think he's Australian or Kiwi, but he's famous for Triple Crown hiking, and he's a big bike tourer as well. His website's great, but he listed all of the different ways. He did not badass it, but he listed the person who did badass it through the Darien Gap, hacking through with machetes and getting guides and stuff. It is
no shit.
Super dangerous
with machetes.
It's super dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It is full of every pitfall. It's a freaking Indiana Jones meets James Bond meets
Bridge over River Kwai kind of shit.
Meets Narcos. I mean, it's like all those things rolled into one.
Damn.
But most people do a different route. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I was trying to find the
like machete.
The video maker. Well, so I'd be down for machete, but I've heard some pretty like not great stories about that route.
It's mostly bad stories. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it would be.
Oh, I'm so going down this rabbit hole tonight.
Oh,
by the
Google
way.
it.
I'm getting
trying
no
to.
packing
I'll send it to you.
Darien Gap, man.
So my route would be the sailboat route because
cool.
I have a couple of inroads with the sailing community, and from all of the sailors I've talked to who've been through the Panama Canal and generally hung out around that area, they've made it seem convincingly so that that's probably one of the more like easy routes and more pleasurable ways to do so. So I think basically from what I've heard is if you show up with a bit of time in your hands near the locks, it's just a matter of said time before you can kind of like work your way in with a local yacht club or something like that. And either pay a small fee or earn your passage over as somebody just doing layman work on said sailboat. So that would be my go-to.
Very cool.
And it sounds like that's actually kind of a thing when you get down there. So people these days, enough folks are traveling through here and there that it's an accepted practice, if you will.
Yeah, and that was my understanding as well, because it's like you either have the bucks to just go and pay and go fly or whatever, or if you can invest a little bit of time, you finagle as you mentioned a way around. So
totally,
yeah, it's one of the more fascinating elements of I think that tour, because there I think that there's probably a lot of people that start the tour not realizing there is no way through.
I'm just hearing about this.
Really?
It's like for the first time in my life.
The single most contentious thing about
so many
it, I think.
Tour, bike touring novels.
It's a real deal
memoir.
block. There's no roads. Like the road that goes all the way through Central America literally stops and it does not go through. And the terrain is devastatingly tough, and there's all sorts of narco traffic and other stuff. It's just like it's layer upon layer upon layer. It's the video game from hell. It's pretty wild.
It's like hey, you said you wanted adventure. Hey, we got some adventure for you.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're only halfway, and oh, wah wah, you got to figure this out, yo.
Yeah. Oh
yeah.
Wow.
For me, I mean, I will allow myself to feel differently at the time I reach that point, but I think I'm feeling the boat route personally.
Yeah, I think that's the more. Well, I think that the most common is the people fly it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I couldn't. God, I just couldn't see myself getting in a plane at that point.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's sort of like you've largely, presumably, ridden the whole way down to there, and then to face, especially if you're kind of a completist. There is no such thing as a completist ride from Alaska to Tierra. It just doesn't exist. Except for the badass that got in the canoe and macheted his way around and managed to avoid the poison snakes and everything. So, but yeah, it's you got to choose something, and then you can then you start up again and then you go, and so
totally,
that's cool. Well, I think that's an awesome goal. I'm always super impressed. I've run into a few people when I've done the coast before. I always end up running into folks doing that ride.
Oh yeah, especially if you're doing it early fall, late fall.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And but since I learned about the Darien Gap, I haven't run into anybody, and I'm just dying to ask the question that I just asked you of all the people in the middle of that. And one of these days I'm going to do that, and they're going to be like, "What's the Darien Gap?" And I'm going to be like, "Let's have a talk."
That's funny. So just from the Portland standpoint, I host on Warm Showers, and I would say 1 in 8 that I host is doing that trip.
Do you ask them about it?
Oh yeah, I've got a whole Rolodex. So I'll see if any. I'll reach out and see if any of them are interested.
Oh, that's fun.
But yeah, that sometimes when you can't get out, the fuel you get is the adventure you find in others.
Oh yeah,
and that's always been a pretty present thing for me.
Oh, that's cool. Well, that feels like a really good point to end on, guys. Thank you so much for joining the Pedalshift Project. Thank you for a great 2018, and here's to a great 2019.
Woo-hoo. Yes.
Once again, a big thanks to Aaron and Guthrie and Brock, who actually dropped in on Sprocket 444. You should listen to that. Don't forget to check those calendars for January 22nd and 24th in Tysons Corner, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. for Miles of Portraits. I would love to see you there. More details to come on an upcoming episode of the Pedalshift Project. Happy holidays, and see you in the new year. And a quick wrap up here about supporting the show through Pedalshift Society. With listener support, we've expanded the show to weekly, added tour videos, moved the tour journals from paid to in-podcast, and helped pay for improved equipment and all hosting fees. And it's all thanks to people you hear in the end credits. Why not add your name to the list? We're talking $5, $2, or even $1 a month helps keep things going, and you can cancel anytime. There's also annual and one-shot options too if you're not into the small monthly thing. Added bonus, it's all working again. If you've had trouble signing up, check it out. pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lien, Andrew MacGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrance Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadas, Chris Barron, Brian Hren, Mark Van Raam, Brad Hipwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LoGreco, Ruth Divorcey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Bobby Ruppel, Roy Everett, Greg Braithwaite, John Mayer, William Cairns, Sandy Pizzio, Richard Patch, Mark Messer, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Dave Roll, Joseph Quinn, Susan Brewster, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robber, and new to the society, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, and Kenny Mikey. And thanks also to all anonymous and past contributors for helping to make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available. A big thank you to Cycle Blaze for sponsoring this episode of the pod. Go to cycleblaze.com today and find inspiration for your next tour.
That was a great show. That was a tight show. That was a great show. Happy holidays, everyone.